On to this conversation now. Africa accounts for the smallest share of global greenhouse gas emissions. This is compared to developed markets like China, the United States and other countries in the European Union. Yet, the continent carries a disproportionately heavy burden during climate emergencies. Now, the research groups at UCT that are exhibiting at the World Science Forum, they're tackling issues of climate injustice, and that's where we find our reporter Natalie Malgas, who has been attending that particular forum. Natalie, good morning to you. So the innovations that the researchers there are coming up with, what are some of those? Because I think for some time the focus has been on medical interventions, but we heard the president saying that science must also look at the development of rural areas so that this knowledge is transferred there so that people are able to sustain themselves.
Well, exactly, Xoli. This isn't just about the work being done in silos and in labs. In fact, this relates to scientific research that has to impact the everyday people. It has to change the lives of, and in some instances, save the lives of everyday, ordinary people. As you mentioned a short while ago, the impacts of the climate crisis we're all enduring now is, in some instances, hardest felt on the African continent. So I'm now joined by Kirsty Carden of Future Water Institute here at one of UCT's stalls. Kirsty, your focus is on water, this finite resource, you say, that could, clean water at least, that could run out on us. What situation are we in at the moment, and how dire is it?
So I think it depends where you are. The management of water is obviously really important in each city and each urban area that we're dealing in. Cape Town's had its fair share of issues, and we've had a very dry winter. So there are already warnings from the city for residents to start saving water. The issue is not that we're going to run out of water. The water on the planet is the same as was here when the dinosaurs were here. But it's the way we manage it, the way we treat it, the way we dispose of it, and how we disrespect it. So it's a means of having to look at the way managing water differently to what we've always done.
When we talk about climate justice and we look at the effects, most notably on the African continent, things don't look great for South Africa and the African continent. Why so?
So I think we're bearing the brunt of what the developed world has largely been doing in terms of climate. And policy does not respect what the African residents are doing. So, you know, we're taking the blame for much of really what's happened in the rest of the developed world. And the policy does not respond to particularly poorer people, to the ways in which they live their lives with not very good access to services. And we have to start actually sharing the research that we're doing as part of these sort of groupings of researchers that are dealing with climate impacts and really thinking about what that means for the average African resident living in our urban areas.
On a granular level, what must happen next? Because as we heard from the President in his opening address, and as you just mentioned now, this isn't about work in silos and in labs and university campuses, but it has to relate to tangible change in the lives of the most vulnerable.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. I mean, these are what we refer to as the grand challenges. So UCT has a Vision 2030, which is why people like our research groups are all working on sustainability matters in trying to collaborate across our different research groupings to understand where all of those overlaps are and where our small research institutes can create and develop new policy that becomes more relevant in the African continent.
Thank you very much, Kirsty Carden there of the Future Water Institute here at UCT's stall, Oli. In fact, we're just going to take a quick walk down to our next guest, which is from a different university just up the road here from the Western Cape, in the Eastern Cape, the Nelson Mandela University. But as we pass each of these stalls, quite literally, this is the who's who of the global science fraternity, all coming together, sharing ideas, all trying to come up with great new ideas in various categories. And it would be amiss of us to not touch on the issue of the energy crisis. We spoke about water a short while ago. We know the city of Cape Town averted a day zero a few years back. In the Eastern Cape, that's a crisis that they're dealing with. But of course, every day we're checking our load shedding schedules because the electricity crisis is another one of those headaches we have to endure. Here at the Nelson Mandela University stall, I'm actually speaking to Siyanda. Please tell us a little bit about this really interesting project you've got going on, microalgae, and your projects to avert the energy crisis.
Thank you. So the Nelson Mandela University partnered with the Department of Innovation. The Nelson Mandela University, together with the DSI, funded a project that we call Colgi. So the project is actually the repurposing of coal, wasted coal, using combining it with microalgae. So it's actually for your companies like Eskom and mine companies that have wasted coal, so they can actually use this output from the Colgi to actually use it for the energy crisis.
We know scientists never waste a good crisis. What are some of the other projects that you're dealing with, and this particularly topical one, how did you come up with it?
So, like I said, the funding, we got it from the Department of Science and Innovation, and then we have researchers in our Nelson Mandela University. We have a technology station that is focusing on downstream technologies. So they came up with this idea, which is Colgi. So like I said, it's actually the combination of coal and biomass from the microalgae. So we are using that to convert the waste of coal and to make sure that we're getting clean coal that can be used by the Eskom and any other companies.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Oli, as you can tell, there's a lot of work happening here. The steam that you're seeing coming out of my ears is not just as I try and navigate these very higher grade conversations, but it's also learning about these new subjects, learning about very dense materials, but in how they relate to the everyday person, changing the lives, as we mentioned a short while ago, of the people in the most far-flung rural communities, not just of South Africa, but across the continent. In fact, we're now passing a really interesting corner of this forum that focuses on everything aeronautical, space engineering. One of the big topics here this week has been around the SKA project. They just broke ground on Monday in Carnarvon, where these massive telescopes will be going up in the next few years, doing research around big data, looking into parts of space that haven't yet been explored, collecting very useful information that we're hearing from these scientists and the researchers that again could play tangible roles in our everyday lives.
Natalie Malgas, thank you very much for that comprehensive update. Did you hear her say that literally there is steam coming out of her ears? That's because of the information overload she has been gathering there. What a fantastic coverage.